The Supreme Court has been asked anew to compel Congress to pass measures against political dynasties. Let's talk more about that with UP Constitutional Law Professor Atty. Gatmaytan. Magandang umaga sa inyo. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Good morning, Gretchen. Good morning to your viewers.
Okay, so your group, together with Isang Bayan and two Supreme Court magistrates, that's Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio and Conchita Carpio Morales, filed a 48-page petition for certiorari and mandamus on March 31, urging the Supreme Court to hold Congress accountable for its failure to implement Article 2, Section 26 of the 1987 Constitution that speaks against or prohibits political dynasties. Ano po yung nakalagay dun sa 48-page petition po ninyo?
It's a petition for certiorari. That means that we're alleging that Congress, by ignoring this constitutional mandate, is abusing its discretion. Okay, that's the first part, no? Because this is a command from the Constitution for Congress to enact a law that will deal with dynasties, political dynasties.
Okay, so it is having the highest court in the land to actually compel Congress to do something about it. But this is not actually the first time that this has been invoked. Back in 2012, Vice President Jofisto Gingona led a group of petitioners with the same kind of petition. Pati noong 2013, businessman Ricardo Penson did the same thing. Both were dismissed on the basis of separation of powers and a doctrine of a political question. What makes you confident that this time it will be different?
We think it's time for the court to reassess these prior decisions. No? And there are enough decisions actually that authorizes where the Supreme Court has directed a constitutional body to perform its duty under the law. So, despite those earlier rulings, we think that bearing in mind, where we are right now in terms of dynasties, it might be time to reconsider those earlier decisions. Here, it's not only today, though. It's not only a case of having political dynasties. The political dynasties are unapologetic. When they present themselves to the public, they come as an entire clan. And this is something that we have not seen before, the impunity that we see about ignoring the constitutional mandates is something that has escalated. And I think it might be time to reassess those earlier rulings.
Tama naman po kayo, no? Alam po natin, it is a pervasive problem. For the longest time, 4 decades na po ang lumipas at walang batas na nagawa ang Kongreso because why will Congress curtail itself, di ba? Pero meron na po bang mga instance that Supreme Court has been able to direct Congress to pass certain laws? Meron na po bang precedent po yan?
Actually, nothing comes to mind. No? Tama yung research nyo.
Oo.
The fact na merong earlier attempts and they've been and they've failed. But we're counting on a new perspective. Ngayon kasi when they present themselves as candidates, diba? It's an entire clan. Tapos if you look at the more recent trends, these clans have inserted themselves doon sa party list system. Diba? Meron dyan mga actually extensions lang ng political dynasties. So they have already locked themselves into the system, and these are things that we did not see before. Yung extent, diba? ng garapalan na, let's just say it, okay? Garapalan na talaga yung mga tactics ng dynasties.
Tama po kayo dyan, yun nga lang, this also is a very political question because if the Supreme Court does try to rule on this and say, okay, Congress, you need to act on this, it's one thing also to get Congress to follow, hindi po ba? Kasi in the past, the Supreme Court actually cited the 1924 decision on Alejandrino versus Quezon, where the SC can declare an act of the Senate as unconstitutional, but it cannot compel the Senate to do something without violating the separation of powers. Tama po ba yung pagkaka-interpret ko doon sa nangyari noon?
There are cases where the court can direct a constitutional body to perform a duty, pero it will not tell that body how to perform it. Ay, parang, kasi normally, walang problema pag ministerial duty. Ito yung ministerial, walang discretion involved at all. The law says you have to do this. Madali lang yan ibigyan ng pandamos. Please do this, follow the law. Ang problema is, pag may discretion involved, yan nagiging political question, no? The other branches of government have been given authority over that issue. Political yan. But, there are cases where the court has said, perform your discretionary duty. Pero merong mga angle na that we are counting on na pwedeng gamitin ng court.
Okay. Naalala ko po kasi si Senator Chis Escudero when we had him here, when we talked about the constitutionality of extending the timeline, because forthwith yung nakalagay dun sa impeachment process, kapag na-file na, it should begin forthwith. Pero ang sabi niya, okay, they can say that this one is unconstitutional, but it's up for the Senate or the impeachment court to determine if they will follow parang suggestion lang, no? So may ganun ding dynamic. Yun po kasi naalala ko eh.
Well, yan yung risk, no? Let's say we win and the Supreme Court says Congress should perform its function. Yung issue na ni-raise mo dyan sa trial ng Vice President, I think has also been raised sa Supreme Court. And you're right, there is a risk that the Senate, in this case, or the House, will ignore the Supreme Court. If that happens, then we do have a constitutional crisis. And I'm pretty sure, or I'm hopeful, that the political players here do not want to bring the country to that point, that situation.
So that might be the major obstacle, even if the Supreme Court magistrates would want to rule on this with their conscience, that ito po yung malaking balakid na maaari tayong mapunta doon sa constitutional crisis. Tama po?
Yes.
Oo. Okay. Let's go into the subject of political dynasties. Iloilo Representative Lawrence Defensor did say that we need a fair definition of political dynasties. In your 48-page petition, were you able to define what exactly is a political dynasty and up to what degree of consanguinity would you recommend?
Well, we're not making any recommendations precisely because that is the function of Congress. Congress has to define what will constitute a dynasty. And there are in the literature so many other, so many definitions. As you suggest, it might be a matter of degrees of consanguinity, or affinity, perhaps. But that is for Congress to decide. The problem is they haven't done anything. Yan ang sinasabi ko, nobody can tell Congress what to put in the law, although the Supreme Court, we believe, can tell Congress, please enact a law.
Actually, if we take a look at the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, they have the BARM Electoral Code and the BARM Local Governance Code, where they limit or they ban politicians within the second degree of consanguinity or affinity. So, kumbaga, nandoon na yun. Pero kung titingnan nyo rin po, dun sa kanilang local politics, magkakamag-anak po yung tumatakbo, no? For example, in Maguindanao, we have Teng Mangudadatu running for governor of Maguindanao Norte and wife Mariam running for governor of Maguindanao Sur. and their son, Pax Ali, running for governor of Sultan Kudarat. So we have 9 mangudadatus running, 8 hatamans, 5 ampatuans. Masusunod kaya? I mean, if it is in the electoral code, the local governance code, how do we enforce this? Do you have any idea why they are or nalulusutan ito in that region?
I'm not sure nalusutan, no? Because the remedy would be to have them disqualified based on the laws that you cited. At least they have a law. So I want to see how the voters might want to enforce this by bringing the issue to court. I did read that article na parang hindi nila pinapansin yung yung prescriptions, the prohibitions. But the fact that there's a law that they can cite means that I expect cases to be filed. So we can resolve this issue.
Actually, pati sa Sangguniang Kabataan Reform Act of 2015, nakalagay din, no, must not be related within the second civil degree of consanguinity or affinity. So, mukhang nandyan yan, no, may mga, I mean, is there another way to do this? Maybe, for example, start with the Sangguniang Kabataan, try to weed out, because also, parang in terms of equal opportunity, ang hirap din to say, for example, I guess the argument of politicians would be, competent siya okay naman siya kaya naman niya yung trabaho at tao naman na pumipili dyan di ba? Baka naman pwede nating simulan dito sa Sangguniang Kabataan kasi it is already in place also with BARM itself.
Right. No one has questioned those provisions. And apparently, everyone's treating it as a way of implementing yung constitutional command na magkaroon ng anti-dynasty law, although in pieces. And that's another reason why we think it can be done because it's already in the kabataan, the reform law. And BARM, now if these entities can address a problem that the Congress should be addressing, then it shouldn't be a difficult task, diba? To follow through. Nandiyan na yung example. No one's questioning them as unconstitutional or anything. So, we can build on that. You're right. We can build on those.
Ang question na lang ay sino ang maglalakas loob na magsampa ng kaso doon sa mga politiko. Okay, how about revisiting term limits? Because that has been another argument brought up that it could be a solution to preventing the spread of political dynasties dahil ang nangyayari po dahil sa term limit, nagpapalit-palitan, kumbaga may relyebo muna na kung kamag-anak, tapos babalik yung dati. I mean, are you also looking into that? Is your group open to revisiting or suggesting that we revisit term limits?
We've not discussed it. And the problem with that is to address term limits, you would have to amend the Constitution. And once you bring up amending the Constitution, people get nervous. Pag-usapan na yan.
Pero, I mean, your personal take on this, tingin nyo term limits should be extended at least, kasi in other countries, when they stay in a certain position for a longer time, syempre, they get more infrastructure work done. There's continuity. Also, you could argue the competence in the said position would be enhanced. But on the other side, syempre, if you take a look at if you elect a bad leader, then mas matagal siya doon. Pero yung 3 years, medyo maikli yun, hindi po ba?
Kaya nga merong opportunity for re-election. Diba? In other words, the fact na pwede kang may re-election, di ba? Means that we recognize those limitations that you have identified. Yan ay parang compromise. The other response I'm thinking of is that even if you had a competent politician and extend mo yung term limits, it wouldn't prevent other members of the clan from running for other offices. Diba? It doesn't really address the problem because let's say you have a competent governor X. It doesn't mean that the members of the family aren't going to try to run as mayors dun sa kanilang hometown.
Okay, are you also looking at other alternatives to an anti-dynasty law? Has your group talked about that?
Well, there's some talk about, well, it's also, yung anti-dynasty law can be done, I think, through initiative. This is yung the people themselves gather signatures that ayaw gawin ng Congress, no? Present it sa Comelec, and if you have enough signatures as required by law, then we have a plebiscite, and then we vote. Kung ayaw talaga nila, we can do it. But it does require a lot of work, di ba? Kasi you have to explain it to all the voters, etc., etc.
So we're caught actually in a state of quandary over this, no? Paano nga ba maipapasa yung law against political dynasties? But what I mean, what is the statement that your group is trying to make? I mean, even with the major hurdles that it can possibly face, ano po yung kahalagahan ng pagsusumite ng petition po na ito?
Well, ang message dyan is really, really urgent. And legally, the mechanism for enacting a law that will deal with dynasties is already in place. It's just a matter of complying with the constitutional mandate.
All right, okay. Maraming salamat sa inyo, Attorney Dan, for helping us shed light on this petition. Very brave of your group to go through this, even with its record in the past. But we are hopeful for our nation, as we are always. But maraming salamat po sa inyo for joining us this morning to explain more on that. We have UP Constitutional Law Professor Atty. Dan Gatmaytan.